So we're on a new series, Life Under Lockdown, and we're going to start with hope, the topic of hope this morning. Dostoevsky has pride of place on my bookshelf. I haven't read any of his books, but they look really good in my living room, nice and thick and intellectual. He said this: "To live without hope is to cease to live." To live without hope is to cease to live. Hope is crucial for our living, for our survival. But what is hope? My favorite quote that I found recently on hope is from the poet Emily Dickinson, and she describes hope as this: "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tunes without the words and never stops at all." The thing with feathers that perches in the soul. Hope. I think we're probably all agreed that we need hope in these days. We're probably agreed on the positivity of hope, that lovely picture of feathers that perch in the soul. In our passage here, hope occurs 3 times, and I want to sort of delve into those 3 times. I might only get to 2 with any depth, but we'll look at these 3 times. And I want to suggest 3 practices for hope that come out of these 3 occurrences of the word in Romans 5. To celebrate, to persevere, and to remember. And so the first is to celebrate. That's verse 2, chapter 5, verse 2. Where we are in the book of Romans, Paul is writing a letter to the early church, and he's talking about Jesus and all that Jesus has done for them. And by the time we get to chapter 5, it seems to be the benefits that we now have as followers of Jesus. And he's given 3, and the last is hope. Hope. We boast in the hope of the glory of God. Now, when we think of hope and we think of the glory of God, often our minds probably go first to the new creation, the new heavens and the new earth, where God's glory is going to be known as the waters cover the sea. His new city comes down, and this beautiful picture we have of a new world. That is hope. But I want to suggest this morning that I don't think that's the focus of Paul here in this passage. That is a key part of our hope, okay? And we might return to that again in the series. The new heavens and the new earth is a key part of our Christian hope. But I don't think that's quite what Paul's referring to here. What I've tried to do in my inept little drawing is to circle the people in that picture, because I think the hope that Paul is talking about here is centered on people, on you and on me. He's talking about the hope of the glory of God, God's glory. Now, previously, 2 chapters before, in chapter 3, when Paul talks about how glory has been lost, it's centered on people. And he's talking about how people have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We were made in God's image, made in the image of this glorious God, and we've fallen short of that. That's the lost glory. And when he gets to chapter 8 and talks in more detail about this future glory, he says in 8 verse 18, the glory that will be revealed in us, inside us, God's glory. Chapter 8 verse 20, the freedom and glory of the children of God, a glory that it belongs to us, that the glory is seen in that. And actually in that verse, he's talking about how creation itself awaits for this glory of the children of God to be revealed. So it's a glory centered on people. Specifically in chapter 8, verse 28, it talks about how we are going to be conformed to the image of his Son. That you and me will become like Jesus, sharing his glory in us. We will be changed from the inside out to be like Jesus. That's what he's talking about here. And he's boasting in this glory of God, in the hope of it. To boast or celebrate or glory, revel in this hope. Now, how does this apply to us today? We're in the midst of a crisis. Ronnie talked about that at the start, and we can all agree on that. How is this particular hope going to help us in a crisis? Reflecting on the nature of crises this week, it sort of struck me that really They are a mix of the external and the internal. Of the external, the circumstance, whatever it might be, war or famine, or in our case, disease and a pandemic. But it's how that mixes with the internal, with what's inside us, with how we cope, how we get through it or don't. It's how that combines that really gives us the nature of crisis for us personally. And when you see it from that angle, you see that actually what incredible hope it is that we could be like Jesus, that we are going to be changed to be like Jesus. And right now, we're already in that process. 2 Corinthians 3, we're already being changed from one degree of glory to another, ever increasing glory. This journey has started for us. We are becoming like Jesus. And that's an incredible hope in the midst of crisis. Imagine that we could be like Jesus right here, right now, in COVID-19, in lockdown under level 5. Imagine we had no anxiety or no worry, despite the fact that we're in this crisis. Imagine that we'd no fear. And we didn't live and operate out of fear and make silly comments and lose our temper out of fear. Imagine how that would help our lives and help our relationships and our family and our home life if we could come and operate out of that place. Imagine if we didn't have the need to control things. Surely then we would cope better when we're out of control, or when in lockdown many of our choices have been taken away from us. This is real hope, I think, in a crisis. And you see that it means that the Christian hope is not just a hope that our external circumstances will change. Now, it is that. It most definitely is that. It is the new creation you see in your slide. But it is so much more than that. It's also this internal hope that we will change in our person. So the Christian hope is not just a hope that the storm ends, but that we will become people who can sleep through the storm, just like Jesus did. It's not just a hope that the cup is taken away, but it's a hope that new life in us will be revealed afterwards. That's our hope. And that is something worth boasting and celebrating in. Paul talks about how we boast in this already, how he does it, and presumably the church, the people he's writing to. So we can celebrate this. I encourage you to celebrate. And as you celebrate, just like if we gather together in a physical service, we sing songs, what they do is they cause us to focus on the words and focus on the person of Jesus. And so focus on this, celebrate this, and it will have an impact. Okay, so that's the first practice, celebrate. The second I want to give you today is to persevere. I don't know, maybe that doesn't really excite you. That word persevere doesn't really sound like a very positive word, does it? And maybe you wanted more than that. But I want to give you that word, persevere. I saw on the 6-1 news there, the 6 o'clock news on RTE1, I think it was this week, a few days ago, there was a shot and a little cameo taken from one of the hospitals. It was from Tala Hospital. There was a consultant there who was being interviewed, and I can't remember what he was saying. He was just outlining the conditions in the hospital at the time. But behind him on the wall, there was one of those posters which said, "Keep going, sure it's grand." I just loved the irony of that as he is doing his little 2-minute cameo about how hospitals are already at complete capacity and they're trying to prepare for a surge. And behind it was, "Keep going, sure it's grand." I actually have one of those postcards in my office on my notice board. And it's a Irish phrase and an Irish sentiment, but we can have that view of persevere as just, keep the head down and try and get through it. Now, I think this does call us to perseverance, this passage, but it's different. It's a different type of perseverance. Let me just show you what there seems to be this cycle or circle that's going on here. Verse 3 and 4, suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. There's these sort of 4 stages that go around in a circle. I think the cycle continues because if you get to the end and you get hope, that's going to affect how you endure suffering the next time around. And I think we can see that this is true. Suffering produces perseverance. We have to keep going. We have to, in some sense, stick our head down. There's nothing else we can do. But perseverance, when we show it, produces character, because who we are, we're formed out of our habits. We're formed out of our actions. They change us. We become something that we do habitually over time, becomes who we are. So when we change our action and persevere, it changes our character. We become more resilient people. We're changing. And when this is all done in the context of faith, when we persevere through suffering by meeting it with faith, our character produces hope. That's, I guess, our outlook changes. We become more hopeful people. Put it a different way, I think this little picture, this cycle, is telling us that hope is actually like a muscle. Hope is something that needs exercise to grow. If you don't exercise your muscles, they wither away and you become people of less hope, and you don't have hope. Here I'm using the word not to talk of the great thing that we should believe in, but what actually is in our heads and our hearts and our person. Do we actually have hope? Personal hope. But the more that we exercise it through tough times, through suffering, by meeting it with faith and persevering and changing, hope grows within us. Hope grows. It's a muscle that needs to be exercised. And in the first lockdown, when over 70s had to cocoon, which some of you might remember not too fondly, my parents had to cocoon. And now mum is a big walker. She'd walk 90 minutes a day, and that would be her exercise. But dad was, probably more of a 15 minutes a day guy. And he'd pick up the paper on the way home and probably a scone more often than not as well and go back. And mum would keep on walking. And then when they had to cocoon and they weren't walking at all, mum encouraged dad just to do about 20 or 30 laps of the garden every day. So his muscles, his ability to walk wouldn't stop or fade. And we have to exercise hope. And hope will grow in us. So the first point gives us this amazing big picture that we will change. We will change to be like Jesus. The glory of God in us, revealed in us, Romans chapter 8. And this second point is actually a little bit of the how it happens. That part of it is through tough times, we change by persevering and exercising hope. Maybe desperate hope because we've got nothing else. But it changes us. We become more hopeful. And it's only that reason that Paul is saying that we should glory or boast or celebrate in our sufferings. It's not that sufferings are a good thing in themselves, not that God brings them about because they're good. It's what they produce, God working in them to produce hope ultimately within. So celebrate and persevere. Let me mention the last one, but I'm sure my time is probably gone, and that's to remember. Verse 5, he goes on to say that hope does not disappoint us. It does not put us to shame. He's looking back here. He's saying our hope is certain and sure. It will not disappoint. It will come true. And we know that because of the things that God has done in the past. When we look to them, when we remember them, then we will be assured that all that's been promised will come to pass. There's two things that he points to. Verse 5 in the past, he talks about how God's love has been poured out in our hearts, that we can feel it and experience it. This has happened in all of our lives as followers of Jesus. And so even if we don't feel that right now, maybe because of the pandemic or the crisis, there will be moments when we will have felt and known God's love in our lives, in our hearts. That is a past experience. But even more so, in the next few verses, he goes on to the event of Jesus in history, when God entered into this world and demonstrated his love for us by entering in and by dying for us. Even though we were sinners and not loving to him, he loved us. When we remember that, we will remember that this hope is certain. So I want to leave you with those practices of to celebrate, to persevere, and to remember. I think they are practices of hope for the times in which we live. And I want us to pause at the end. I'm going to give you a little bit of homework, a bit of now work, to do it now. I'm just going to reflect, primarily, I guess, on the first point of celebrate, but also the second of how some of this change in us is occurring now. God is doing it now. So I want you to pause for 1 or 2 minutes. If you have paper and pen, then please do write down the question and then your answer. What I want God to change in me. God has promised to change you, point 1. And point 2, he's changing us right now because we're in a difficult season. So I want you to write down what I want God to change in me. I'll give you 1 minute for that, and then we'll have a second minute where I want you to turn that answer into a prayer. Maybe this become your lockdown prayer. Maybe one you say every day. Put it on your phone, like Helen did, and let it become your prayer. So let's pause. So can I encourage you to hold on to this in the weeks ahead? The promise is that we will change, but I'd love you to make it real and specific during these weeks, because these are real weeks when God can work in us. So what do you want God to change in you? And please do write that into a prayer. Put it somewhere prominent, and either on a phone or on a piece of paper and on a bookmark or something, that it can become a regular prayer.